Modals of obligation. There are 4 different types of modal verbs used under modals of obligation. We have must, have to, should, and ought to. Before my discussion on modal verbs of obligation, please read the following sentences and answer the following questions. Doing what you love isn't a privilege. It's an obligation. Obligations. Definition of terms. Look for the meaning of the following words: direct, compulsory, permanent, flexible, common, and differentiate the following: internal obligation versus external obligation, advice versus suggestion, rules versus regulations versus laws. Must and have to both express general or permanent obligation. They also give strong recommendation, advice, and opinion to the receiver of the action. The little difference between the two is must can be used in the present and the future tense. On the other hand, have to can be used in the present, the past, and the future. Let's take a look at the following example. They must wear face masks when going outside, meaning to say the speaker of the action is actually obliging the subject, they, to wear masks when going outside, meaning to say the subject, they, doesn't have or do not have any other option but to follow, probably because it is mandated by the law that every people or everyone must wear masks when going outside. On the other hand, on the second sentence, he must study harder if he wants to pass the exam. The speaker is actually obliging the subject, he, to study harder if he wants to pass the exam. The subject doesn't have any other option but to follow, probably because he might fail the exam if hindi siya nag-aral ng mabuti. Have to. Present, past, and future. We use have, has, kung ang subject natin ay singular, had, kapag subject natin ay singular and plural, and have, kapag ang subject is plural. Has kapag present tense, had kapag past tense, have kapag present tense, and then to. Let's take a look at the following example. She has to take 2 trains and a bus to get to school every day. Meaning to say the subject, she, doesn't have any other options but to commute through trains and a bus to get to school every day. She is singular, meaning to say we must also use has. Another, she, singular, however, had in the past tense, meaning to say there is a time frame of 10 years ago. Another, they, plural, so meaning to say we have to use plural have. And let me explain. Must and have to share or express both general or permanent obligation. The subject or the receiver of the action doesn't have any other option but to follow the rule or law. Another noting difference between must and have to is when you want to describe internal obligation or something that we want to do, meaning to say the speaker, use must. However, when you want to describe an external obligation, for example, somebody else wants us to do something, or the authority for the obligation doesn't come from the person who is speaking, we use have to. Ma'am, ano po ba yun? Nakakalito ang difference ng must and have to. Let's take a look at the following example. These pants don't fit me anymore. I must lose weight. Okay? In this sentence, the obligation comes from the person speaking o yung speaker ng action, si I. Siya ay nagsasabi sa sarili niya meaning to say internal obligation, that he or she must lose weight. Okay, internal, coming from the speaker himself. On the other hand, in the second sentence, my doctor told me I am overweight and I have to go on a diet. As you can see, the speaker uses have. Okay? In this sentence, sinabi ng doctor, okay, sinabi ng doctor meaning to say external, somebody else want us to do something. Sinabi ng doctor sa subject natin na si I na overweight siya, so kailangan niyang mag-diet. Okay, that is the difference between must and have to, or internal or external obligation. Okay, obligation that comes from within, we use must. Okay, however, an obligation or a recommendation or advice coming from someone else, use have to. Okay, now complete the following sentences. In France, you blank to drive on the right. I blank drive on the right side of the street. As a doctor, she blank keep herself fit and healthy. Another, she blank avoid unhealthy. Should and ought to both express personal obligation or moral obligation. The little difference between the two is ought to is more formal than should. Okay? When we say personal or moral obligation, meaning to say, for example, honesty is the best policy. Okay? That is a moral obligation. Pero wala naman part ng batas na kailangan natin maging honest. Or there is a corresponding consequences kapag hindi ka naging honest. That is personal or moral obligation, being honest. And then, another noting difference between should and ought to from must and have to is that under must and have to, you don't have any other option but to follow. Dito sa should and ought to, the receiver of the action has the right whether or has the option whether to follow the opinion or advice given to him or her. For example, she should study hard so she can pass the exam. The receiver has the option whether to follow that advice. That is the difference between should and ought to. You have the option whether to follow or not. Unscramble the words and add you to write sentences that give advice. Sometimes more than one answer is possible. Example number 1. Decide what you want from a job / should / really. The answer is, you really should decide what you want from a job. You should really decide what you want from a job.